Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. This is our first ever town hall with our corporate members, very valuable corporate members. As we will discuss today, IFCC has had a long-standing collaboration with many corporate members, and Joseph and I will present on some of the current activities between us. But I wanted to first welcome everyone. I think this for the first thing we should do is start introducing each other. Maybe we'll start with those executive board members of IFCC that could join us. Unfortunately, not everyone was available, so a few of us are here. So happy to meet with you. I'm Khosrow Adeli, based in the University of Toronto in Canada, as the IFCC president, elected last year and until 2023, December of 23. So I'm pleased to be here, and this is a new initiative to increase dialogue between our organization, IFCC, the scientific part, and the corporate members. And so I'm happy that many of you were able to join us. So maybe we should go to Alex, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexander Chaliasos. I'm the treasurer of this board, elected also at 2020, starting from 2021. And really, I'm pleased that I'm part of this initiative of IFCC today for the corporate town hall.
Thank you. Joseph?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, good evening. My name is Joe Passarelli, and I'm your corporate representative on the executive board. I actually have a slide in my slide deck that gives a little bit of my background since I represent all of you, so I'll wait for that during the presentation.
Thank you. And I see Sunil has joined us, who is our board member. Sunil, please go ahead.
Hi, Khosrow, Joseph, and our corporate colleagues. Hi, my name is Sunil Sethi. I live in Singapore. I am the Asia Pacific representative on the IFCC-EB and also the president of the Asian and Pacific Federation of Clinical Biochemistry. Delighted to join in today and looking forward to a nice session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. And Anna from Latin America has joined us as well. Anna, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes. Hello, how are you? I am from Uruguay, and I'm the regional representative of Colabiocli at IFCC. And I am a chemist. I am a doctor in chemistry, and I'm very happy to participate in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any. Let me see if we have, who else we have from our board with us. I'm just checking to make sure I don't miss anybody. Doesn't look like anyone else has been able to join us. Some because of time zone issues, some because they weren't available. But why don't we, maybe Joseph, you could start either introduce, or perhaps you could go around the table and everyone could introduce themselves and the company they represent.
Yeah, I was just looking at the group. So it's some people don't have their name up, but maybe to start, because I just saw her join, maybe Trisha Ravalico could introduce herself. She's the chair of the task force corporate members, which to share very transparently, I had considered Trisha presenting today too, but given the short time and the fact that Khosrow, you and I were going back and forth live and so many to the very last moment, I didn't want to put this on Trisha, but Trisha, maybe you can introduce yourself, and then we can go around to the other members that I see on the task force, not to highlight them amongst the others, and then we can go around to the other individuals.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, everyone. It's really an honor for me to be here today. My name is Trisha Ravalico. I'm the Director of Scientific Leadership and Education for Abbott. I also chair the task force of corporate members beginning January of this past year after Joe moved on to represent the EB. So he was the chair formally for that team. I also serve as the corporate representative on the CPD committee for the IFCC. I'm in my second term, and I've been associated with many different IFCC initiatives, including the Committee for Cardiac Biomarkers. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very passionate about laboratory medicine. I see a lot of the members of the corporate task force on this call, which excites me a great deal. And yeah, I'm excited to kick off this town hall. Thanks.
I'm going to go to Vincent Chen, and there's a reason why, and I need to apologize for all the individuals from China particularly. I learned through Vincent only yesterday that today is a holiday in China. It is Mid-Autumn Festival, Moon Festival as we call it here. And unfortunately, this is the time of the evening where people spend with their families. So Vincent informed us. I've already spoke to the IFCC office, and we will make sure that next year's town hall does not conflict with any holidays. So sorry about this to anyone who's affected. And Vincent, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everyone. I'm Vincent from Snai, China, and I'm the representative of IFCC of my company. And it's nice to know everybody today and have a nice meeting. Thank you.
And maybe next, I'm just going not in any particular order, but to the members of the task force. Jordi, perhaps you can introduce yourself next.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Jordi Trafi. I represent Orthoclinical Diagnostics in this call, and I'm as well a member in the Corporate Members Task Force. Pleased to be here. Thank you.
And now, because he's right below you on my screen anyway, Jean-Sebastian, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jean-Sébastien Blanchet. I am part of the medical and scientific affairs team within Beckman. I've been in the industry for more than 15 years. And I'm part of the corporate member task force. I'm also part of some other working groups or committees around standardization of immunoassays. And I'm really welcome this opportunity to have this open discussion today.
And I need to apologize because I should have gone to our secretary second after Tricia. Alexandro, sorry about that, but you're not on my first screen, so I missed you. Sorry.
Not a problem at all. Thank you, Joe. My name is Alessandro Tisi. I'm serving as secretary of the Task Force of Corporate Members. Happy to do that starting in April. I'm also corresponding members of the Committee on Cardiac Biomarkers, and today I'm representing Siemens Healthineers instead of on behalf of Ross Molinaro that apologized himself, excused himself that he cannot be part of this meeting. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Alexandro. Maybe next to Brendan.
Excuse me. Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. My name is Brendan Mayer. I'm representing BD Life Sciences, the diagnostics side of our business. I'm based in the UK, and as a member on the Task Force committee members, I'm also a corresponding member on the Committee for Value Proposition in Lab Medicine, and I've recently taken up a role as industry representative for NICE's Diagnostic Advisory Committee. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And next to Gavin.
Thanks, Joe. And, you know, I'm now in Indonesia. I cannot stay with my friends and my families because for the business. So we're glad to see all you guys in here, and hope we can have a good cooperation in the future. And thank you so much. And next year, you still can use this thing because I always in the foreign countries. Yes. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much. Next to Jan Gorka.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everybody. My name is Jan Gorka. I work for DISIS Diagnostic Systems, and I'm a corresponding member, not the corporate representative of our company, but I represent our company here in the task force and looking forward for a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to Maurizio.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everybody. I'm Maurizio Gramegna. I'm scientific officer in technogenetics from Italy. I'm also a corresponding member and also involved in some other working groups for the IFCC.
Okay, and I think I hit every one of the official members, but I also see Anne on the call. And Anne, I was not going to mention your name in the slides. You'll see what this means later. But Anne joined our task force just as an observer to see if she wanted to join officially as a corresponding member. And Anne, maybe you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Joe. So my name is Anne Skurup. I represent Radiometer in headquarters in Denmark, and I have been corporate representative within IFCC for quite some time. And I'm so happy to see that the corporate members are, getting together and trying to, to collaborate closer with IFCC. So I'm also looking very much forward to this afternoon here. Thank you.
And Joe, I haven't made the announcement, but she has decided to be a corresponding member to the task force. So now we're 12 companies strong. So very, very good. Thank you, Anne. And then thank you all.
Thank you, Tricia, and thank you, Joe.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then I think we've hit everyone. There's some other people. I'm not sure, Khosrow, that we should maybe go. I don't know. It's up to you. I do see Stephen joining us from, from North America. So maybe, Stephen, you're a part of the executive board. Maybe you can introduce yourself too.
Good morning, and I'm very sorry to be late coming on to the call. So my name is Stephen Hill. I'm at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, about 70 kilometers west of where Khosrow lives. I'm very pleased to represent the North American Federation on the executive board. The North American Federation provides a voice for the two North American societies on the executive board, the AACC and the CSCC. Thank you.
Okay, should we continue, Khosrow?
Yeah, I think we should ensure that everyone who is here introduces themselves.
Sean Peng, maybe you can go next.
Good evening or good morning. I just in Shanghai, China, and I'm the representative of FCC of our company, Shanghai Kehua Bioengineering. Yes, so nice to meet you all in the on the cloud. It's really a holiday for us, but we are very like to enjoy, share our moo cake to all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, once again, apologies, we weren't aware of this.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was watching the local news where I am, which is in the middle of the US, and they were having a moon festival somewhere else here. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Next to Hilja Eibert, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah. What?
Yes, Hilja Ebert. I'm the CEO of Gentia Diagnostics. Our headquarters is in Norway, and I'm as well the corporate representative for the company. And I'm looking forward to an interesting event.
Thank you very much for joining. And there are a few other ones, but I don't know how. Do I just say live direction number 1 and that person knows to join? I'm not sure how I can do this. Oh, sorry, there's Terry. There's Terry Valalenk. Yes, maybe he's one name I see.
Yeah, basically anyone who hasn't introduced themselves, please go ahead and do so.
Sorry, yes, I was on mute. So Thierry Vidalin, so I'm representing Bioad Laboratories. I'm managing the marketing groups for EMEA region, so Europe, Middle East, Africa, Russia, for the clinical diagnostic activities.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves? Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm Fabio Rota. Oh, sorry.
Hi, this is Prasad Pamadi. I'm joining from the Werfen Group, formerly the Instrumentation Laboratory, BioKit, Innova Diagnostics. They're now part of the Werfen as our parent company now. I'm really glad to join this group and learn more about the corporate membership and of the IFCC. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else we haven't heard from?
There's a person in
Yeah,
thank you. Go ahead.
hi, good afternoon from Italy. My name is Fabio Rota. I'm head of R&D here in Sentinel Diagnostic. And of course, I'm just representing Sentinel Diagnostic. And happy to be here with you and to be in touch with you to share our experiences.
Thank you. Thank you for attending. Well, I think everyone seems to have introduced themselves. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your attendance, all of our corporate members joining our board. And we're going to have a couple of presentations. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce our office staff. We have 4 staff in Milan who support all of our activities. So I wanted to thank all of them. This is an opportunity to thank all of them, starting with Paola Bramati. Paola, would you like to introduce yourself? And then Silvia's and then Meralda.
Hi, hello, Paola. I almost know many of you. I'm really interested in this town hall corporate member, giving the chance to meet all together. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
So thank you very much for participating into this meeting, and we are happy to welcome you in this first town hall for corporate members. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia.
Thank you. I'm Silvia Cardinale. I'm based in IFCC office in Milan as well. Thank you for participating in this meeting. I'm very glad to be here. And I'm dealing in particular with the EMD and the CCC inside the IFCC office. Thank you.
Thank you. And Meralda?
Hello to everyone. I'm new in the IFCC office. I'm learning all about it. So for me, it's an honor to be here and learn more about all of you. And thank you.
Thank you, Meralda.
And I'm sorry, Cosmo, I need to jump in because I shared something with Sylvia 15 minutes before the call, and I need to say this to everyone. The IFCC staff is absolutely the best. I deal with a lot of organizations, and I don't know how they do it all. So thank you not only for everything, but also the task forces. I come from the scientific division where there's so much going on, and really top-notch group. So thank you very much. And I shared this with Sylvia.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to echo that. And really, if you look at comparable organizations, I mean, IFCC, as we will see, is the largest organization in this field. And it only has four full-time staff. And that's quite a accomplishment for the staff to be able to support such a large organization, dozens of groups and committees and task forces and so on. So a huge amount of activity. It's hard to imagine how they handle all of that. And we have kept asking them for new things. And town halls, we had just had a town hall last week, a very successful one, with over 1,800 people attending from Europe, Africa, and Middle East. And they pulled it off very well. We had a strong, attendance and also a great discussion. And we're hoping to do that today with our corporate members. We have 2 other town halls coming up, one for North America and South America in mid-October. We're confirming the date, and then one for Asia Pacific. So so we're adding a lot of work to their sort of dashboard, and hopefully they're able to manage, although IFCC does intend to add additional staffing if needed. Anyways, thank you very much. I saw Anne raise her hand, but I don't know if she had a question. Anne?
It was just to clap for the IFCC staff, so I just wanted to compliment that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to have 3 presentations. We'll try to keep it short. but we're hoping to finish within the next 40 minutes or so, and then we have enough time, about 2 hours, maybe a little less, for discussion. So that the main aim of this whole concept town hall is to have an open forum and open discussion, to ensure we address any questions our corporate members have, but also address any concerns that there may exist. First, I'm going to give an overview of IFCC organization and what we're doing currently, and then Alex will, our treasurer, will share with you a quick update on our finances, and then Joseph will give actually the main presentation, which is about the corporate membership in the IFCC and a lot of the current activities. So, any questions, Joe, before we start?
No, I think we could start.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Do you see that? Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to try to keep this to about 15 to 20 minutes. Thanks again for attending our first town hall. I do realize that this was announced back in the summer without much coordination, although we did contact Joseph and the task force, and we were able to set this date. But it's difficult to consult every one of the corporate members, but we will try to perhaps provide earlier notice, perhaps next year. We like to continue this annually. So this is not just a one-time event. We're hoping these are annual events. So we're hoping that there will be another one next fall and so on, after every year after that. Now, there are additional opportunities for IFCC to meet with corporate members because there are a couple of other meetings that IFCC could attend and answer questions. But this is sort of hopefully would be the main event where there will be ample opportunity to discuss various issues as well as any concerns. Now, IFCC is, as I mentioned, is indeed the largest organization in the field of laboratory medicine and in vitro diagnostics around the world. It currently has the blue countries are all the members of IFCC. So currently 95 full members and 17 affiliates. So we have over 12 members and importantly 49 corporate members, and we will talk about that at length. Now IFCC, when you look at members in each country that are part of the IFCC family, what I call IFCC family, is really over 45,000, if not more. That's an old number. It's probably over 50,000. These are specialists in laboratory medicine in most countries around the world, and they're all affiliated with IFCC. Now, IFCC has regional federations, and this is important. So we have 6 regional federations, and this shows it here. In Europe, actually, the largest federation is the EFLM, you're all aware of, European Federation, and as well as the Arab Federation, mostly in Middle East and parts of Africa, and African Federation. Actually, last week, as I mentioned, on the 15th, we had a 3-hour town hall with all 3 federations, and all their presidents attended and presented. And as I mentioned, large number of members as well attended, and we had a great discussion. So we're going to do that with other regions. The other regions are, of course, North America, and that's really US and Canada, and then Kolabiokli, which has over 25 different countries, members, And we will be having a town hall with them, as I mentioned, because they're approximately in the same time zone. We're going to have them join the next town hall mid-October. Then, of course, Asia Pacific, which is one of the largest regions, as you know, in the world, and also a federation within IFCC. And actually, Sunil, who is with us, is the president and currently board representative from Asia Pacific. So this is really, when we say the IFCC family, we mean all of these 6 regions, and we all work together. One major change that was made several years ago was that to have a representative from every federation, all 6 federations, on the IFCC board, and that has really improved links between the IFCC executive and all of the federations. Now, I mentioned corporate members, and that's why we're here. And this is a slide that I took from Joseph, and he will talk a lot more about corporate membership. But I have to tell you, I think you already probably know, IFCC is probably one of very few, if not the only organization with such a strong corporate engagement and membership. And we currently have 49. We already have a couple of additional members, applications already in process. I can see this growing. Actually, just in the last year or two, we have had several new members added. So therefore, this clearly bodes well for greater engagement between IFCC and corporate members. And the nice thing is that the corporate membership is from all over the world. Of course, mostly from Europe and North America, but quite a few others from other parts of the world. Now, IFCC, telling you a little bit about more about IFCC for those who are not as familiar, IFCC is a worldwide non-political organization. And these are the 3 major longest standing sort of missions of IFCC. One is to establish global standards, as you know, in many aspects of diagnostics and laboratory medicine, supporting its members through scientific and educational programs, and providing a series of congresses, conferences, and ways, and recently live webinars, to try to bring members together, but also educate. Now, IFCC was formed actually next year we will be celebrating our 70th year. So initially it was founded in 1952 in Paris through the work of IUPAC, and it was termed International Association of Clinical Biochemists. It was later renamed as IFCC in Brussels in 1955. And then following that, it actually was the lab medicine piece was added in 1997. So now it's really, the full name is International Federation of Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine. Because it really has a broader mandate. Now, this is the structure of IFCC. We have the council. The council of IFCC is basically those member countries. The 95 member countries form the council. So our board really reports to the council, the IFCC executive board, which I will show on the next slide. Then we have a number of committees and special projects, task forces, and of course, the various divisions. Most of the activities actually is currently happening within each division. The scientific division being the largest, currently being headed by Professor Philip Guillory from Paris. He and a large number of committees and working groups actually are currently focusing on many aspects of laboratory tests and laboratory medicine. And I think many of your corporate members or corporate colleagues are actually working with those groups and committees. EMD, or Education Management Division, headed by Professor Nader Rafai from Boston. He and many committees and working groups are working on aspects of education and management. Communication and Publication Division, headed by Professor Tahir Pillay from South Africa. He, again, there are a couple of committees. This is a smaller division, and working groups working on several projects. And a new division that was added several years ago is the Emerging Technologies Division. And I was just in Europe last week, and we met with this division, and Professor Sergio Bernardini is the chair of the division, and I know many of you know him, and he's actually made this division very active, and there are a huge number of projects currently ongoing. Now, this is the current executive board. The executive board members, some of them were here and introduced themselves, but I wanted to mention that David Kinneberg is our secretary. Alex, who is with us, fortunately, is our treasurer from Greece. David is from Canada as well. Joe, of course, our corporate representative, representing Roche, but also representing the entire corporate membership on the IFCC board. Okesina represents the African Federation. Dr. Healy representing the Arab Federation. Sunil representing Asia Pacific, and he's with us. Anna Maria Semendik, unfortunately, she had another engagement. She couldn't join us. She represents the European Federation. She was with us last week when we had our European and town hall, and we had a great discussion. Anna Leno, who fortunately is with us, representing Collab and of course, Stephen Hill, who also fortunately has joined us, representing North America. So this really shows that we have true representation, direct representation from every federation, and of course from corporate membership. Now, one of the first things, this board was elected just earlier it was elected last year, and it started its work in January. But of course, it started its work during the pandemic. And so one of the first tasks that we had was to respond to the pandemic. And I wanted to share with you a lot of the work that IFCC has done over the last year and a half to respond to the pandemic. As soon as the pandemic was announced in March by WHO in March of 2020, we formed a task force. This task force actually has a strong membership, including 5 corporate representatives. And some of you, like Maurizio, is actually on this task force. And this task force has been quite active. It has actually published several guidelines in the last year. And they all listed here, biosafety in labs, molecular testing, serological testing, biochemical immunological testing, rapid antigen testing. And all of these are actually being used. Many member countries have told me, and others have presented at different meetings, indicating they're actually using IFCC guidelines when they are testing. This is particularly true in developing countries. So truly these documents and what the task force has been doing has been very helpful. And all of these have been published and are available free of charge for download. We had made sure that they are readily accessible. We also formed an online resource. This has been updated continuously. It's actually the most recent update was about a month ago or so, and there is an update coming this month. So it is being basically updated. Those who are not aware, there's huge amount of good information, literature collected and published on this resource. We also have had special webinars on COVID-19, and they've been very well received with thousands of attendees. Now, these are the documents I mentioned in collaboration with Professor Mario Plebani, the editor of CCLM. So CCLM is Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine. They all have been published, several in 2020 and one a few months ago in 2021. So therefore, these are really important documents, and we are actually currently discussing a new guideline on response to vaccination, and how do you monitor response to vaccination or success of vaccination. We've been waiting for more publications before this guideline is written. But in addition to respond to the pandemic, IFCC has developed a new strategic plan and has started activities on a number of fronts. And the main focus of the new strategic plan is to be more active on the ground. One thing IFCC has done very well, but at the same time, I would say it has been a concern, is that it has had a lot of meetings, a lot of committee meetings, and has published, guidelines and documents, but not been perhaps as active on the ground around the world, especially in developing countries. So the idea is to try to increase direct sort of impact of IFCC's activities on member societies and member countries. So our goal has been in this strategic plan to directly impact healthcare delivery and patient outcomes through a number of new programs, directly contribute to global lab quality. After all, quality is everything when it comes to lab testing and lab operations. So IFCC has a mandate and has an obligation to support especially developing countries who do not have appropriate EQA, IQC, or even reference interval, up to the reference intervals to assist them in this kind of activity. We also wanted to work on developing evidence on the value and impact of our field, our profession in healthcare. And so a task force is being formed in that regard. And of course, a major expansion of our e-learning and distance learning. The IFCC live webinar is one example. So I sort of already introduced this, so I'm going to go through each of those programs briefly. We don't want to spend too much time. One of them is, of course, to try to, as much as possible, of course, it's going to be very challenging, but try to do, IFCC is aiming to have a more direct impact on healthcare delivery and patient outcomes by supporting labs around the world. So IFCC vision is to be proactive and directly impact global healthcare in developing nations. And one of the first projects that we feel has important impact is global newborn screening. Only around the world, only 30% of newborns are actually screened. Almost 70% of newborns around the world are not screened. So the idea is to try to, as much as possible, it's a huge task, but as much as possible, try to support developing countries in terms of developing newborn screening programs. So this is the plan to develop, and this has started already, and I'll give you some progress report. Newborn screening advocacy program has been initiated to work with governments around the world. Of course, we have to do one country at a time, but it will take a long time, but at least good to start with some of the more developed, less fortunate countries that have very little, facilities to do newborn screening. So we've been working, we're actually starting collaboration with WHO. We're developing NBS guidelines in collaboration with CDC, which also has vested interest, and CLSI and AACC. And so, in addition to that, is to try to support clinical lab operations on ground in those countries. Now, I'm happy to tell you a task force was formed last January, so just about 9 months, been active for about 9 months. And this is the membership. And actually, we have membership from around the world, headed by Professor Bonham from the UK and Professor Luong Pineda, nominated by AACC from the US. Now, the progress actually has been, pretty significant. We initially had a global survey to determine which countries have appropriate newborn screening programs, which countries don't. And then we have started discussions, have had meetings with CDC, CLSI, and AACC. We have and selected, or in the process of, the task force is process of selecting countries to start the first pilot. And we're hoping that this first pilot will start later this fall or early in 2022. The second important program is the lab quality. And this is, I know, very of interest to many of you. We have actually, again, formed a task force to try to initiate activity in this regard. The vision is that the IFCC organization really is obligated and mandated to directly assist clinical labs to improve internal and external quality assurance through analytical quality measures and post-analytical. So although most labs focus on analytical quality, the truth is reference intervals are important equally. So we're trying to address all of these issues. And to do that, we formed a task force. Maybe I should just, for the sake of time, move to this. So this is our task force headed by Professor Aman from Germany, Professor Meng from US, and they have actually been quite active. There was a worldwide survey completed. 10 countries have already been selected in Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Asia Pacific, in Latin America. And these countries will be beginning an IFCC run EQA program, as well as an IQC program. And we are actually working with corporate members. Several have submitted proposals, and we are selecting one or more corporate members, and IFCC will fund this activity directly, and they will provide the materials. IFCC will basically provide oversight of this program. So the first pilot, actually, the proposals have already been submitted. We were just reviewing it earlier this month. So a decision should be made by the end of September, and the program could begin anytime this fall in 10 countries. So this is the first pilot. So we're going to try to do this, learn from our pilot, and then make this more of a permanent program. The ideal future vision is that IFCC becomes a EQA provider and IQC provider, or basically provide guidelines, oversight, materials. So the idea is that we will provide all the necessary materials for these programs through our IFCC budget. Related to quality is also important to have up-to-date reference intervals. So we are trying to put together an IFCC database of global reference intervals. And so therefore, to do that, we need a task force. And the task force was just announced in June. 21 nominations have been received. 8 have been selected to work on this task force. And the work of this task force will begin sometime this fall. So the work is in progress, but the idea is to create one resource, one global resource. So if any of your corporate colleagues, any of you, or any IFCC member society, any student, any physician, anyone who's looking for reference intervals for adults or children, or even geriatrics, can go to the IFCC website to obtain this information at no cost. So the idea is to make IFCC the major provider of this information. Currently, there is no single resource available anywhere. So the idea is to change that. Finally, we also wanted to, of course, focus on e-learning and distance learning. Our vision being that IFCC should be the largest provider of free, and that's important, free e-learning, distance learning programs globally in the field of laboratory medicine. And this has, one of the major features of this is the live webinar series. The live webinar series, as you know, we had a pilot last fall, and then after that pilot of a few webinars, we saw a lot of good response from our, the entire, basically, community around the world. So therefore, we have continued this. A task force was formed, and this has continued, and we have new projects as well, such as full day workshops or half-day workshops, practical workshops, e-courses, in addition to live webinars. But I'm happy to tell you that this has been a truly international webinar program with over 3,000 to 4,000 attendees per webinar. And more importantly, attendees are coming from over 100 different countries. In one case, there were 118 countries represented in one webinar. I'm also happy to tell you that Siemens has kindly agreed to provide a stable 3-year funding for this program at a substantial level. So I would like to thank our Siemens colleagues. Boston Children's Hospital and Nader Rafai has also, their foundation is providing support as well. They have also signed a 3-year sponsorship agreement with IFCC. I guess there's one more thing left, and that is that committee, we wanted to look at the evidence that exists and needs to be developed on value of lab medicine in healthcare. The idea is that IFCC should be trying to promote the field, but through evidence. First, establish that there is indeed good evidence that we do make a difference and that most of the clinical decision-making is based on laboratory testing. And this is, of course, should be of great interest to IVD industry. And we like to really closely collaborate with our IVD colleagues. So the task force was again announced in June. 13 nominations received, 6 selected, including, I believe, 3 corporate members have been, out of 6, there might be 2 or 3 corporate members. So a strong corporate representation, and the work is to start this fall. Okay, so I'm going to finish with conferences. I know there are questions about conferences, and I wanted to provide you some basic information, then I'm going to stop. We have 3 major events coming in the next year or 2. One is our Euromed Lab in Munich, that's scheduled end of November. The World Lab in Seoul, as well as the Euromed Lab in 2023, which is already scheduled to be in Rome. The new schedule of IFCC conferences that we're going to have one event every year. Either one year would be Euromed Lab, the following year would be the World Lab outside Europe, somewhere else. So we're going to try to have this sort of regular schedule over the coming several years. An update on the Munich meeting. I'm happy to tell you that despite the pandemic, we have had very strong support from corporate members. And this, interestingly, we keep receiving new applications for exhibitions, even in the last couple of weeks. So it shows that there's continued and growing interest in being at this conference. Of course, we have our concerns. Everyone has concerns about, travel restrictions and so on. But on the other hand, we have many abstracts submitted, over 770 abstracts. And the plan currently is to have on-site exhibits and industry workshops, but also we're going to try to make the scientific program hybrid. So those because many people outside Europe may not be able to travel, especially from, Africa or less developed countries, developing countries. Therefore, we want to make sure they have access to the scientific program. Right now, we're optimistic about the attendance. We cannot predict. Our early registration deadline with discount is October 15. We're going to wait until October 15 to determine what kind of attendance we're likely going to have. Fortunately, the German government has recently reduced many of the restrictions. And so there is, as long as you have a green pass from Europe, or if you are from US or Canada and some other countries, all you need is to show your country's vaccination record. And I was just in Europe with David and others and Stephen, and we went through several airports and there were no issues. I actually attended and presented at 3 different conferences in 2 weeks, and I had really no issues with travel in Europe. So I believe the situation is improving, and there should be hopefully more attendance. It will likely not be as much as we had, let's say, in Barcelona in 2018 because of the pandemic, but the attendance is likely to be high. But we really cannot, of course, predict what that number will be. The conference in Seoul also already have significant strong corporate support. And I have to tell you, again, we just recently received more sponsorships and more exhibition application. And so therefore, there is growing corporate support for that meeting. We're optimistic that by then, it would be easier to travel through Asia Pacific, and it would be also well attended. We're going to try to make the scientific program hybrid, but the exhibits will be on site. So this is the current plan, but again, we're going to have to wait and see how the things develop with the pandemic. But with the high rates of vaccination in many countries, we are optimistic about the future of these conferences. So this is really the end. To summarize, IFCC is truly a worldwide non-political organization. Its really main role to link clinical chemistry societies, federations worldwide. It's a major body involved in development of standards, and it's a major venue in many cases for international exchange of scientific know-how, and it's a major facilitator of education and communication in the field. So I think I'll stop there, and we will have opportunities to questions. Thank you very much. So perhaps—
Khosrow, can I jump in here for a second, please? Sure. I was going to go into this in my presentation, but a question has come up. How do people ask questions? And so maybe I can go just a little through the logistics of how this will work. First of all, for those that are on the screen, you see 29 participants, I think, last count. But there are many, many more passive participants that are on the call. I don't know how many those are. So if you have a question that you need, and we have, I will tell you, so many questions have come in that we have more than enough questions to take the next two hours. But if you have a question, please use the chat function, and I will try my best to moderate and ask those questions as we go. I have an order of the questions based on the number of receipts I got. So there are many high questions and then they go down. But certainly for anyone on the call, if you have a question, use the chat function on the call, okay?
Thank you, Joseph. That's very important. Yeah, I believe those who are on with us, the 29, can ask questions verbally, or they can type in the chat. Those who are in the background, of course, would need to use the chat. Okay, So Alex, would you like to, I think Alex has prepared a brief finance report.
Yes, thank you, Khosrow. I hope that you see my screen. I'm Alexander Chaliatos. I'm the new treasurer of IFCC. I'm based in Athens, Greece. And I will give a short report of the finance of IFCC. As you can see, IFCC in the office with the health of personnel during the last 9 months, we settled every invoice coming to the office, and we assured that the annual dues of full affiliate and corporate members has been received. And we revised the adherence of operating units of IFCC to their budget allocation. And this was an easy task for me because of the absence of physical meetings in the last year. We have kept detailed records of all transactions, and the reimbursement for many of you was impossible in the beginning of this year because our bankers approved and gave us the signing rights to our accounts, to the president and me, at the beginning of May. And the financial return of IFCC investment on our investing account has been monitored. And we audited, with the help of an external auditor, the annual accounts and the financial actions of IFCC of 2020. You see, here is the income of the IFCC. On the budget we had for all 2021, 1,007,015 Swiss francs, and until the end of the August we have received already the 1 million. And you see we are leaking the income of EuroMedLab that was at the beginning scheduled for this May, but has been rescheduled for end of November. So although we are missing this amount, we had income from other sources, as for example, for the IFCC virtual conference. It is the same detail, but very small to see it. This is presented graphically, and you see that it was the total budgeted and the income until today. You see we are missing this one, the EuroMedLab profit, but we have some other that wasn't from the beginning thought that we will have so high returns. So here are the expenses. As you see, in the budget was a little more than 2.5 million Swiss francs, and until the end of August we have about 410,000 francs because of the rescheduling of EuroMedLab that consumes a lot of the resources of IFCC. So the summary for the budget, normally we expected at the end of 2021 a deficit of about 900,000 Swiss francs because we don't receive all the income of EuroMedLab during the year. For the moment, we have a surplus of 600, but when we will start settling expenses for EuroMedLab, you will see that will pass from green to red very fast. And as for the investments of IFCC and from auditing report, you can see that we had on 2019 about 3,018,000 Swiss francs that decreased a little during the pandemic in 2020 and because of the fall of the markets. But on the last report that I inquired at our banking system, at the end of August we had 4 million because all markets bounced up. That's for the moment, and thank you for your attention, and I will wait for your questions during the Q&A session. And now I'm passing the screen to Joseph.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. And just a question, does it advance? No, it's not advancing, sorry. Let me, I have to stop sharing for a second. Can you, does it advance? Yes? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Sorry.
Joseph, could you put it on presentation mode?
Yeah, I'm oh, here we go. Sorry.
On the right, yeah, there you go.
Better?
Yes, yes.
Okay, just a couple opening comments from my side. And first, I promised David Kinneberg, you had already mentioned this, Khosrow, he sincerely apologizes that he could not come here. He has a conflict that he couldn't really change. I also want to apologize. Besides the holiday in China, this came up by a number of people. Why was this the only date chosen? And why didn't we have multiple meetings to accommodate the various time zones? Because this is very late in Asia Pacific, very early if you're in the West Coast of the United States, and somewhere in the middle. And honestly, we could not, this was the only date. In fact, this was the date that the task force was supposed to meet, and we had to use this date for the town hall. As you can imagine, everyone is very, very busy. And so I think in the future, maybe we could have a couple town halls, but what I'm told by the IFCC office is that the recording of this will be on the IFCC site, so we can get this word out. Just a little bit about the logistics, and this goes not only for the members of the task force, but also anyone that's participating on the call. I would highly encourage candid communication, questions. This is our one opportunity in this year to really ask the executive board of the IFCC those important issues that our companies are dealing with. And I fully expect these will be respectful and professional, but also I think they should be direct. And so I would really encourage everybody to take this opportunity. I certainly will. As I mentioned, I have so many questions. We will not get through all of the questions. I've tried to bucket them. But what I would really like to handle before I go to the questions that have been submitted so far is to go to your questions, because I already have a few emails that came in based on what Khosrow said, that there were questions on this. So if you have burning questions, please interrupt at any time. Use the chat function. And Sylvia, if I don't see it, please bring it to my attention. So I'm going to go through my slides very quickly. And this one was just the agenda. I wanted to tell you a little bit about who I am and my involvement with the IFCC, because I represent all of you. Currently, I live in the United States in Indianapolis, which is the crossroads of America. It is said this way because we have many highways and motorways that go from the north and south of the entire country and from East Coast and West Coast. We also have a very, very extensive rail system, and we are famous for the Indy 500 car racing. I've been with Roche for 36 years, and for the last 10 years, I have been focused on being the liaison, the scientific liaison to professional societies, IFCC, you see them there. I also serve as the secretary to the board for CLSI. And I have a long history with the IFCC. I actually began my collaboration with the IFCC around 2008. For 11 years, I served on the scientific division, first for 5 years as its secretary, as its corporate representative, representing all of you. I then stepped down a year early because I was asked to become secretary. I served 2 3-year terms. As was mentioned, I was the first chair of the task force for May of 2019 to the end of 20. I had to step down, but I remain as a member. And now I've started as your corporate representative in January on the executive board. But there are many, many other corporate members that are serving key divisions within the IFCC, and you see them here. I won't go through all of the names, but you see that there are four main divisions: scientific divisions, ETD, Emerging Technology Division, where we actually have 2 corporate representatives, the Education and Management Division and Communications and Publications Division. And also we have a committee on congresses and conferences. And for those on the call that are new, and I want to maybe go to this, and there are many, many more. I mean, I will just speak for my company at Roche. We have more than 20 colleagues that are serving the IFCC right now. So there are many, many corporate members on the various groups. I want to go to this slide just a second. You've already seen this from Khosrow, but you see now the names associated with the various divisions. And for those that are new, please recognize that when a person's name is here, they do not represent their home company. They represent all of the companies within the IFCC. So if you have a question about the scientific division, a particular task group or a working group, something very specific, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Michael Rotman. And you will find his contact information on the IFCC website, but also you will find it through the IFCC office, or contact me. These are your key contacts for the divisions. You also see Tricia, as she had mentioned, she serves two roles. One here as a corporate representative, as well as one from as the chair of the task force. So we already said there are 49 companies in the IFCC, and there are many new, and you'll have this information on the IFCC website. I want to come to this slide, which Khosrow already showed, and I want to have a call out to my predecessor. So I saw yesterday that Ralph Hintzman also has registered. He's probably in the background. And Ralph Hintzman, Ralph, if you're there, hello. Thank you very much. We've actually modified many of your slides, so just to say that. But more importantly, Ralph Hintzman served for 6 years on the executive board representing all of you, and I am now his successor. And I'm going to go very quickly into this task force. And this was one of the major achievements that he got approval from the previous executive board to institute. And for those that are on the task force, we've really done a great deal of work, and it's really a great advancement of corporate membership to the IFCC. So Ralph, thanks very much. So here's where the corporate members are based. You see many are in China, and then it goes down. It's a little bit misleading because I mentioned I live in the United States. Of course, Roche has a very, very large presence in the United States, but our official corporate representation comes from Germany. So since 2014, there have been 23 new corporate members, and this is really, really good news. Many of them come from Asia Pacific, which is also very, very good news. But unfortunately, since 2014, there have been 27 cancellations and 2 additional ones as a result of mergers. And there's a lot of anecdotal reasons why this is occurring. We could speculate. We have some good information, perhaps, of the reasons. But in the end, in 2019, and maybe even before, the executive board decided that we should have some mechanism by which we can retain corporate members and create stronger engagement. And this now comes to the task force. Excuse me. Which was created by the previous executive board and began its activity in Budapest at the General Conference in May of 2019. And here is the members. I had already mentioned Tricia and Alexandro as the chair and secretary. With all due respect, to every other task force, committee, working group in the IFCC. And remember, I have almost 15 years of experience with this. I would say that this task force, this group, is the most active I've ever been involved with. Just to give you a sense of what Tricia initiated when she took over, is we have now had monthly meetings. The first 2 or 3 months were for 3 hours. Because of COVID, we couldn't meet in person. And subsequent to that, we have had 2-hour meetings, absolutely religiously, every month. And I don't think any group is doing this. So I really, a big thanks to the members. We have very, very active members. You see them here. They introduced themselves before, and they are truly active. They engage, they participate. What for me is extremely, extremely beneficial as well is our corresponding members are extremely active and engaging. I've dealt with a lot of other groups, and many of the times, with all due respect to those groups, the corresponding members are there to listen, to take information, but there's not the other way around so much. This is not the case of the corresponding members, and we learned today that we're going to add a radiometer to this group. So very happy about this. We also invite the division corporate representatives. So my colleague, Michael Rotman from the scientific division, Andre Ziegler from education and management, et cetera. And the reason why we invite them to our meetings is because they become then the mechanism by which they can communicate to all of their corporate companies within their divisions. But of course, the more the memory, the more the better. So please, if anyone on the call is interested that's not representative already from their company, please reach out to Tricia or myself, because we would be more than happy to invite you. So one of the tasks that we decided to do this year is to try to determine in a more quantitative way why companies were joining and then leaving. And so all of you, if you are the official corporate representative for your company, should have received at the end of July a survey where the deadline was the end of August. We've now extended this deadline to the end of September. And this survey, I'm going to skip this because I want to go to the questions. But if you go on the website, you will see the objectives of the task force. I would highlight to be the voice of the industry, and also to really focus on high impact of the Congress and Congresses. We're running out of time, so I'm trying to go a little quickly. So you would have received a questionnaire where there are 11 questions which you've asked to rate. I think this may be not exactly how it came out, but the most important or least important. Please, if you have not done so, or you're not the corporate representative for your company, please reach out to that individual and make sure they submit the survey by the end of the month, because we really want to use quantitative information to decide in the task force what we should focus on next. And there were also 7 questions that were asked in the survey. And once again, please be as transparent as possible to the answers. So for example, what can the IFCC do to enhance membership? I mean, that's a very broad statement, but I can assure you the task force will look at every verbatim response and try to address it and come up with some action plans. I also want to highlight the Congresses, because this is a key aspect of corporate membership. And I suspect that people on the call do not know that there are specific corporate representatives that actually should represent you in the organization of these meetings, and it goes through this Congress Organizing Committee, COC. So you see here, Cosro mentioned EuroMedLab. There is a person from Abbott that is responsible to represent all of us. And you see in Seoul, also from Abbott, and there's a colleague from Roche, who is the individual that is really tasked with representing us. So if you have specific wants, needs, questions, please reach out to these individuals, and you can ask the IFCC office to get you in touch with these people. And then finally, this is my second to the last slide, because we were hoping to have 2 hours of questions. I want to announce, I think maybe it came out already, but if not, that we are planning, hopefully live, but I've asked the IFCC office to have a virtual option for companies to connect. We will hopefully have a meeting for corporate members in Euromed Lab on Monday, 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. The details and agenda will follow. It will not be the same as the town hall. And so I encourage everyone to join either in person or virtual. We're going to format it a little differently. Khosrow and the EB and I have not figured out exactly how the format is, but it will be different. So you're not going to waste your time to attend. And the other thing is, maybe for those that are going to be in Munich, it will be a light lunch will be provided by the IFCC office. And this now is my final slide to once again thank everyone for attending. I know that everyone is busy. This is not at the right time, and so for some geographical areas, but we very much appreciate it. So we now have almost 2 hours, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but because I see there is a question in the chat. So let me go to this question, and then I'll tee up the questions that I've received before. Oh, there's other ones too. So this comes from one of the corporate members. It says, IFCC is actively involved in standardizing measurement of various analytes. I am interested to know, what are the analytes that the IFCC is planning to standardize in the future? And actually, I probably, Khosrow, can take this because I come from the scientific division. So maybe I should take this, and then if others want to join. I know Michael Rotman is not on the call because he communicated he had a conflict, so he would be the best person. So the IFCC, working through an organization that I would highly encourage you to look into. It's called www.harmonization.net. So www.harmonization.net. This is a group that is connected to the IFCC through an organization where the IFCC is the secretariat, and this organization is the ICH CLR, and it's also working with JCTLM, which many of us know. And essentially, I serve on this group, this harmonization group of the ICH CLR, so I'm very familiar with the activities. This group is responsible to prioritize those measurements that should be standardized next. Okay, so if you go on the site, you will see a lot of content. What happens then is this group funnels this information to the scientific division of the IFCC, and they have some discussion within their committees to decide what is the next approach, what is the next measurement, what is the next thing to standardize. So some of the recent ones were procalcitonin, PCT. There's also activities going on continuous glucose monitoring. This is a brand new working group, and so on. So I would encourage you two things. First of all, look on the IFCC scientific site because you will see new activities come on. I can't comment what are the new ones coming later, but the other thing is I would highly encourage you to reach out to Michael Rotman. As I mentioned, he's your corporate representative on the scientific division, or even the IFCC office and the scientific chair, Philippe Gillery, who can maybe address those questions and what's coming next. I'm not aware of anything that's been proposed to the EB yet. So that's that question. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, she
Can
put,
I add?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, this Dr. Guillory will be presenting an update at the Munich meeting. There will be a IFCC council. There will be a report by each division. And so Philip will talk about any of those new activities or new analytes that they are planning to look at. But there are a few that are under discussion.
Okay, I'm going to, eventually I'm going to stop going to the chats and then going to the actual questions we receive, because many of the questions come around some very important topics. But just a comment from, sorry, Stephen, you sent it to everybody. Thanks very much for your comment. I thought it was just to me. Okay, so Khosrow, Alexander, the rest of the EB, is it okay that I go to some of the questions that we received?
Please, perhaps you could ask the audience who are present if they have questions before and then we go to the written questions. Are there any questions based on the presentations that you just heard? Otherwise, we have a list of written questions that Joseph is going to go through, and we'll be happy to answer them. But are there any questions? Perhaps it looks like we don't. So let's go, Joe.
I actually.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead.
The hand. This is Jordi Rafi. My question is looking to the strategic imperative. I wonder if an area that we discuss frequently at the task force that is it is around the regulatory constraints that we may have in the industry, and we wonder if the IFCC should be more active on that field, not taking any role of other actors that already exist. But for instance, we were speaking about the standardization, harmonization now. Sometimes we change the standardization of products that impact the regulatory status of the products, need to be resubmitted. At some moment, it can also be a question of market access for those products and market availability of some of these products, right? So changes in the standardization may create some harder in terms of product access to market and then availability for the medical labs. We are thinking about something that is in the list of questions that Joe has, like what is the impact of IVDR, the new regulation in Europe, coming into market, and what is the impact that will have for availability of products for a period of time, right? So all these things that are not scientific in nature, but that somehow impact the access of products to market and therefore the availability of those products for the clinical laboratories, right? So I just wonder if, looking to the strategy, that should be an area that the IFCC should look into incorporating into one of the strategic pillars.
Yeah, thank you, Jordi. Joseph and I perhaps could address this. I should say that traditionally IFCC has not been involved in such discussions around regulatory issues, but EFLM, the European Federation, is very much involved, and they have actually a group working on this issue, the IVDR and some of the recent changes. And there are a number of people in communication with the regulatory bodies. So actually, Joseph brought this up recently at our recent board meeting in Milan, and we actually have plans to get IFCC more involved. We wanted to first have a dialogue with the EFLM to see where they are. We don't want to duplicate effort, but we wanted to support what they're trying to do, because we fully agree these changes, these proposed changes, if they're not done, if more time is not provided to IVD industry, this could have impact not just in Europe, but around the world. So IFCC does have a vested interest to be involved, and we definitely want to be involved. We're not sure how we can help, but that's something that perhaps if you have suggestions, but we are starting a dialogue with EFLM to try to sort of support them in their efforts as well. Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can just add a couple things to this. First of all, we have a very, very acute issue, the IVDR. This comes very quickly. And as Khosrow said, and I'm not going to reiterate this, I would have wanted to go to Milan last week to sit down with Anna Maria, who's the president of the EFLM, but she also could not join. And so we have to sit down. I think, as Khosrow said, we should work first through the EFLM and not duplicate it. But Jordi, I think you raise a much bigger issue, a much larger issue beyond the IVDR. And to be honest and very transparent, Khosrow, this is not to you because you are not the president, but I have discussed this issue. And this is my pet peeve. If Ralph Hinzman is on the phone, he knows it too. I have discussed this issue for the last 3 presidents, that the IFCC has to do more. And I'll explain why. I come from the scientific division where there are 6 committees, there's, 16 working groups, who knows? They do fabulous work to standardize or harmonize analytes, and then corporate members do not pick them up. And the major reason why they don't pick them up is because to make a change and do all of the activities associated with a product change, and then the education to the physicians, the clinicians, and the patient, it's not worth a change for something that's 15 or 20%. I hate to say it that way, but I know a lot of the people on the call are purists, but we have to look at the impact of spending millions of dollars when there are many, many other things we have to do. So to maybe address this and to really defend the IFCC a little bit, in December, from December 6th through the 10th or 7th through the 10th, there is an attempt to bring the regulatory groups together. And this comes from this group that I already mentioned, the IFCC, the ICH-CLR, and JC-TLM. It's a meeting in December. We're supposed to be in Paris. It happens every 2 years. It's called the JC-TLM Stakeholders Meeting. And this will be virtual this year, but it's a 4-day meeting. And we're going to engage 2 different sessions. And the main goal of this group is to try to harmonize the requirements for regulatory submissions globally. So there is somebody from the FDA that will be a presenter. There is somebody from the EU notified bodies that will be there, and there's somebody from Asia Pacific that will be there. And the goal would be, and I'm one of the organizers, so I know a lot of the details of this. The goal at the end would be to come up with a recommendations paper that could be shared. Now, I have to tell you, this is a huge, huge, huge nut to crack. It's very, very difficult. There's been numerous groups for the last 10 years that have tried this. But I think beyond this, Khosrow, as an action for the EB, we should take whatever we get, because it's only a few more months. Let's take what the EFLM is doing, and let's do at the executive board something more than that. I've also had discussions with the AACC, and I have to tell you, the AACC on occasion does meet directly with the FDA and tries to bring this forward. So I think, Jordi, thank you very much for the question. It's a bigger issue, and I have to defend a little bit about the IFCC because there's many groups to do it, but I think we could do more. For sure, we could do more, and we can engage so many experts that are in the IFCC family to do more. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the group before we go to our written questions?
Hi, this is Trisha. I typed one in the chat. It was announced today that there was 3 corporate members as part of the outcome committee. As a person who nominated someone and a person who actually, is responsible even for someone who's in the background who, hasn't heard, this is news to me. So if someone could share who those people are or send a communication, I don't believe communications to that effect have been sent out. And knowing that people are hearing it for the first time on this call is not ideal. So if there could be clarity on who was selected for that committee that you said there were 3 corporate members on, the task force of outcomes?
Yeah, the slate of candidates or nominees that were selected was presented last week to the EB. So we were waiting for the executive board to approve the slate of nominees. So it's now has been approved. And so letters haven't gone out yet, but maybe should be sometime this week. Letters will be going out to all of those sort of members of each task force, and including the corporate members. But I don't want to reveal names at this point because they have not been contacted yet.
Okay, well, good. I mean, there's probably names of those people on this call. So it's just nice for them to know, guys, the letters haven't gone out. So it was probably
I have to say that, Trisha, that every corporate member that was nominated has been approved. So all three were strong, including the one from Abbott, but others as well. There were 3 strong nominees from corporate, and all have been approved.
Excellent. So does that mean that the structure of the task forces have changed in terms of the relationship of the number of corporate members or even the number of active members on a task force? Because I noticed there were different numbers in terms of some having, we have a very strict number of how many members versus corresponding members, but it does seem to be different now. So is there a change in the guidelines for what's happening there, even in terms of corporate representatives?
So good point, Trisha. Traditionally we had 5 members each task force, and the task forces had sometimes 1 corporate representative, not always actually. Because we have new projects and we have, we really want to get the work going, we have expanded those numbers. We now have more, whatever we need. We basically have, in some cases, actually, for like the global lab quality, we have 12 members instead of 5. Including corporate members. I think we have 2 corporate members on that one. And for the COVID-19 task force, we have 5 corporate representatives, and they actually have been involved in writing the guidelines. So we do really want to have a more direct, working relationship with our corporate members. And so we're not going to limit to 1. If there are strong people being nominated, they have the right background, we have been recommending them to serve to join the. So you're right that traditionally it used to be 5, and we had 1, sometimes no corporate representative, but that's changing. For this particular task force, the outcome studies, and I know David and I have been working on forming this committee, or not committee, task force. Our vision is that there should be a strong corporate representation because of the fact that we want to do studies that are sort of outcome studies that involve IVD, and having IVD manufacturers represented is really important. We're not necessarily looking for funding at this point. We just want a strong representation. And so that is the reason for selecting all 3.
So does that mean, and I just want to make sure I got the takeaways, the role of the corresponding member, it seems like it's going away because now there's more corporate members. And then as a takeaway from me as the chair of the task force, that earned corresponding members who play an active role can be a member now because there's not a limitation for the total number of members?
Yes, you're welcome to sort of recommend to the EB. The EB always needs to approve this slate of new candidates, or nominees. So yes, if you feel that there is a member that you like to have as a full member, why not?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to mention, but it just escapes me about membership of task forces. But you mentioned corresponding members. We do continue to have corresponding members. Actually, many people who were qualified but were not selected are then offered corresponding membership. But we do look at whether they are qualified. Do they have the right background in that area? Let's say quality assurance. If yes, but they were not selected, they have been offered. So actually, some of these task forces now have several, new task forces have several corresponding members as well. Any other questions?
I just want to add something else, Cosmo, and Alexander, correct me if I'm wrong, because I had some new learning just last week at the meeting, just speaking about task forces. I was always under the impression that there was a very, very specific funding given to committees, working groups, and task forces. And I don't quote me, but I think the task forces were 8,000 or 10,000 Swiss francs. However, I learned, and please correct me, is that at least for one of the task forces, the quality one, this will be funded by the IFCC. It was a decision made for a much, much larger amount than what I just quoted. So for full transparency, since a lot of the funds that are coming into the IFCC are coming from corporate members. This also, just to Tricia, your distinction, this is also a distinction that there are some task forces that get funded based on the activities associated with it at a much, much higher rate than others. So maybe, Alexander, you can address this so we're fully understand the changes that are being made now with some of the logistics.
No, I will say that many years ago, when a specific functional unit, either task force, working group, committee, was a special project that needed more funding, and that was usually this time applications, databases that cannot be organized with the normal funding of this functional unit, the EB can allocate more resources for this exact task and nothing else.
That's yeah, and to add to that, you're right, Joseph, that the sub committees. All committees, all task forces had a core funding. Core funding meaning just for travel. So it was because everyone, remember, committees used to meet just once a year. So that's why I think was in many cases very slow progress. The task forces used to meet once a year. And so therefore the progress was relatively slow. So we have tried to change that using the new, of course, Zoom technology and video conferencing. We have encouraged everyone to meet more often. Some task forces, like Tricia's task force, meeting monthly, and some are actually meeting every couple of months. So it's becoming much more active. And as Joseph and Alex mentioned, if it's a special project like the quality assurance, we have on top of the travel budget, which is still there in case we can start traveling. So it's usually 8,000, 8 to 10,000 a year. That's just to cover travel costs. But on top of that, for example, the quality assurance was given 100,000 for the first year to fund the pilot project. So things like that. So definitely IFCC is willing to invest where it's needed. And the funds that you as corporate members are providing, my vision, and I think the entire board's vision, is to not just travel, committee meeting. We got to make a difference on the ground. Therefore, our aim is to reduce cost of travel as much as possible, minimize cost of sort of internal organizational cost, and focus on where the resources are needed. So focusing on helping developing countries with quality assurance is, of course, an important endeavor, and several others. The live webinar programs, providing them free of charge. We will be providing free workshops, practical workshops to a lot of developing countries, to providing more scholarships. more visiting lectureships, so on and so on. So the idea is to support countries around the world, members, with the help of a lot of the funding you provide, rather than spend on our travels.
Thanks very much for the clarification. Yeah, this was new to me just last week when I asked a question about this, because I come from the scientific division where many of the activities in the scientific division cost more than what is allocated by the IFCC, and they go out and seek additional sponsorship from corporate members. This is a very good segue because I want to stay on cost and expenses. There was a number of questions that came in about EuroMedLab and the meeting in Seoul, and they all were, I'm going to truncate them all because there's so many, but they all revolve around the following. Because, and Kazuo, you had mentioned this, because we already anticipate the participation at EuroMedLab will be less than it normally is because of all the restrictions. And because we expect even in Seoul, that will be a difficult meeting for everyone to attend, maybe, maybe not. I think I can't stress this any greater, that the corporate members feel that there should be a reduction in fees for both sponsorship and exhibitor space, because we all know, and the AACC last year is a good example of this, and I'm going to the AACC. I expect the attendance to be much, much less than normal, and we know that our companies have scaled down the presence in the exhibits, but I think we don't see a reduction in the fees and the sponsorship and the support that we are to give the IFCC, when in fact the value of the conference is less to us. So maybe you can address this, and I think it's great that we have both the president and the treasurer to address this.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have actually, because I saw those written questions, I have been consulting with our both treasurer as well as with our conference organizer, MZETA, in terms of how we're, what kind of, what situation we have in relation to the Munich conference and the Seoul conference next year. I gave you a brief report in my presentation where we are with these two conferences, but I want to remind you that originally the conference, the Munich conference, for example, the EuroMedLab that's coming up in about 2 months from now, that conference was originally planned for May of this past May. So therefore, a lot of the sponsorship had already been provided and paid. Actually, most of the sponsorship have already been paid. Then we had a detailed, the MZETA, which has been dealing directly with exhibitors and with, they had several meetings with especially the major sponsors, the platinum sponsors and the gold sponsors. There were meetings with those representatives, industry representatives. And the industry representatives did not ask for any change. They actually asked that the conference is postponed to this fall. And that's what, so actually IFCC went along with what because we were wondering at that time, EFLM, the European Federation, and IFCC were wondering, do we go to virtual? Do we go hybrid? Do we cancel the conference? But their preference, the major sponsors, were to have the meeting in person, physically, in Munich this fall. And so that's what IFCC actually has followed their advice, and that's what's happening. Now, of course, unfortunately, the pandemic continues, and so there are still concerns as to what kind of attendance we're going to get. So we're waiting until mid-October to see what kind of registration numbers we're going to have. But we are optimistic. Based on the meetings I was just at that in Europe, I mentioned, a lot of people were attending meetings in person, and there was little social distancing, actually. So it looks like people are starting to attend these meetings. So we're optimistic that there will be a strong European attendance, and perhaps from Canada and US, because they can travel to Europe and several other countries. So we think that we're going to have a reasonable attendance. We don't know, but if it turns out that by mid-October we have the registration numbers are low, then we were thinking we could look at some potential incentives. Now contracts have already been signed, the funds have already been paid in many cases. So the question is, how can we help our corporate sponsors? And we were looking at a few potential ways. I don't want to go into details, but we're looking at some ways to help our corporate members, for example, free registrations, potentially free workshops at no cost, the virtual workshops. The other is potentially discounts at future conferences, things like that. We're looking at a few options.
It was not a question so much, but it's a comment. One of the options that one of the corporate members suggested, and maybe Khosrow, this is where you're going, is for because of the lower attendance and since the contracts are locked in already, the sponsorship, but perhaps the industry could sponsor workshops, many more that are live stream or free of charge, that will create a greater presence in lieu of the discounted pricing. So this came in, and please, I would put this as one of the options for consideration.
This has actually been my recommendation to the Meseta, to our organizers, to the COC, the conference. My recommendation has been, let's provide free workshops at no cost, opportunities. There are spots still available for workshops if corporate members would like to propose them, to either hybrid with some in attendance and some online, or even fully virtual. So those opportunities are available, and we could work out the details through our PCO. But I suggest waiting until mid-October, because that's about a month and a half before the conference. At that time, we could announce additional workshops if we find that the attendance is not that high.
Yeah, I'll just provide some additional perspective. Thank you, Khosrow, for your feedback. My push would be not to wait till October. As a person who's responsible for making the go-no-go decision for AACC, and knowing that other companies have done the same, many of which are canceling because of low attendance. Reality is, because there's legal agreements, because there's travel associated with KOLs, because we represent that brand to the KOLs, making last-minute decisions to cancel a workshop is not ideal. And the perception of the value of live workshops at live conferences at this point is pretty low. And that's coming off the heels of all of us saying, hey, we're going to do this for AACC, and recognizing, not unlike Jordy's comment, that at the end of the day, when we're talking about single digits or teen numbers, the expense to the value is not there. Now, we absolutely want to amplify, but amplifying usually costs tens of thousands of dollars on top of the tens of thousands that's already being invested. And so the easy thing to do is not do them, right? And so if we wait till October, I can tell you, at least on my behalf, it probably will be too late. So I just encourage there to be, and I know I'm not representing Abbott when I say this, because I've been part of the task force committee calls, et cetera. And I know that I'm part of the corporate advisory board for other conferences. And I can tell you it's really real. And having that knowledge for you, it's actually kind of an advantage, because if you're even considering it, I think it could protect many excellent workshops. Because what we want is to educate. We want to support the IFCC. We want even them to happen live. But if the only outcome live is whoever happens to show, with the outcome of the pandemic being some lingering out there, we have to go based on what we're seeing at other conferences, which may end up not giving us that opportunity to share those messages. And so anyway, I just don't think October is a realistic, mid-October, late October is a realistic number, particularly because the topic of that, knowing, at least I know of several companies in the last 24 hours, including Abbott, are making decisions now?
Yeah, thank you. I actually agree with you, Tricia. And my suggestion is, if you want to organize workshops, go ahead and start doing it now. But we will, the scheduling through MZeta can be done later as to when it's going to be held. But if you want to start like finding speakers and you're putting your program together, my suggestion is go ahead. I will discuss it with MZeta to see if we could perhaps start this process earlier. They wanted to wait because the registration deadline is mid-October, and to see. But I actually was my recommendation that we provide workshop opportunities as much as possible. There are only some spots available already on the program, so those you could go ahead faster and be able to start organizing, and we could schedule those. Don't necessarily have to wait until October, but I actually initially proposed myself end of September, but they wanted to wait to see what kind of numbers we get in terms of registrations. But I will discuss it further. But my recommendation to all of you is, if you want to organize workshops, go ahead, start planning, and then we could try to see for the MONEC conference, but also for the Seoul conference. My view is that every conference in the future has to be hybrid. Ideally, we do want the people who can afford to travel to come in person. But the truth is that most part of the world cannot afford to travel. So regardless of COVID-19 restrictions, even under normal circumstances, only a small number of people can afford to travel. It costs thousands of dollars to attend a MONEC conference or the Seoul conference. So my message to our corporate colleagues is that you should always arrange virtual and hybrid workshops. Don't wait for these physical meetings only. Do try to have hybrid if possible, to have some people in attendance. We did that in Rome just 2 weeks ago. It worked really well, where there were people in attendance and then people online. And it worked very well. We had 100 people in the room and 100 people online. And it worked really well. And there were presentations in person as well as presentations online. So it can work, and it can work really well. My suggestion is for every future conference, whether it's IFCC, AACC, or anything, that's the model that we should all follow. IFCC will be following that for all future conferences. And my recommendation is that all corporate members should plan that. And because—
So I'm sorry, if I could restate, because that's fantastic. If you're saying that that's the future model, then you're saying that the IFCC is funding the hybrid element, so making these virtual as part of the package. So there's no additional dollars for companies. It's something that the IFCC is doing as the standard new model, because all future workshops and conferences will be hybrid?
No, that's not what I'm proposing, because I think the corporate, like we had, remember for our virtual conference, we had a virtual platform. Remember, you and Joseph organized a nice industry forum, and we had many symposia. So the scientific program were organized by the IFCC and paid for by IFCC, the platform and the cost of everything. But the workshops were organized by the corporate, and they had their own either Zoom or some other platform that was used. It was not necessarily, I have to double check. There are ways to go through the same PCO, but I'm saying that at this point, we don't have, I don't know if we have the resources to provide all the facilities, platforms for every workshop. I would have to discuss that. But the idea is that you would be able to go ahead. There won't be a fee charged by IFCC, but whether we can help technically, I would have to check.
Okay. The reason why I say that is because it's sort of part of the decision process for the companies, right? If it's 18,000 plus or minus to do a workshop and 25,000 plus or minus to videotape, for us to get what we would consider to be a good number for that investment, it's these have to be going hand in hand, right? And obviously, if it used to be 18,000 to reach 500, and now it's 18,000 to reach 5, right? That's why people are canceling workshops, right? And so if it's 25,000 to if that 25,000 or whatever it is waived because we have some type of standard process based on bulk everything, then companies may only get 50 or something, but the value is still there because it gets amplified, but it's not at twice the cost to the companies, right? And so I think that's the sort of thinking, hey, there's no one more interested in doing workshops than probably the people on this call, but we also have to defend the ROI, and it becomes harder and harder to do so when these live events, unfortunately, just don't have the return. But yet the body, and as you said, 75,000, like there's the vehicle to do it if we can come up with a good value proposition for both sides.
Yeah. But just to finish that, Alex, I wanted to say that, the truth is that this is all new to everyone. It's new to corporate, this situation, this pandemic. The IFC is new to IFCC. We predicted that the situation, both the corporate and IFCC predicted that by this fall, by November, things would be much more normal, which is not the case. But it is getting there, starting to getting there. I think most of Europe is vaccinated, so I think the future is more likely to be bright. But the situation is something that we'll all have to sort of right now. What we're trying to do is provide assist the corporate to have more activities at the MONIC conference and the SOAR conference. But what you're suggesting is really for future conferences. For future conferences, planning needs to be always for hybrid events. That's my proposal. All workshops, all scientific programs should be hybrid. Sorry about that. Okay, Alex, go ahead. You wanted to, yeah.
I would like also to say that we will try to make everything in order to facilitate and help our corporate members to have the virtual part of their workshops, even if their workshops are completely virtual. I think, but we have to discuss with the PCO and the Conference Center of Munich about their technical capabilities, but I don't think that will be very difficult. And of course, if things were wrong but that we expect, we will try to find ways to virtualize as much as possible the conference, because for the beginning we have said that only 2 rooms will be live, and normally corporate members will provide the transmission of the virtual parts of their industry-sponsored workshop themselves. But this can change after consultation with the Congress Center and the PCO.
Yeah, thank you so much for anything that you can do for this, because it's a real problem and it's happening now. and we are having it now for AACC, so great.
And some other that I have to say here, and because I'm also the president of the Greek Society, and we are organizing very soon our national congress. There is strong push from the commercial part of IVDs that are pushing for real in-person meetings in order to accommodate VIP clients, etc. So maybe inside the organization of IVDs, they have to arrive to a consensus what they want from the conferences, because we say to them, maybe there is a problem and maybe the conference will be completely virtual if we don't have enough physical registration. They cannot want to accept the commercial part of IVDs this. So this also is contradictory for us.
Alex, if I can take that and build a comment here. One of the issues is that the contract that we are signing with you, with your partner, in this case, MG Congress, but not only with them, I mean, with other partners that commercialize the conferences, are very close or very protective for your side and not protective at all for our side. So we sign a contract for sponsorship, And it doesn't matter what is the final format of the conference, we pay the same, right? So obviously at the moment that we were paying and we were selecting the sponsorship package, we were paying for the return of a live event, right? So this is why we have paid for this. This is what we would like. Now, when this becomes impossible because of the context, no one is saying the context is going to be different now, the fees that you pay are different. So we have paid for live and we get virtual, right? So for us, it's not the same, obviously. I think that one of the issues here is that we are blocked. At the moment that we have the sponsorship is only protecting one of the parts. When you pass the timeline for withdrawing and recovering some money, you recover nothing. But on your side, the format can change and can change to an extent that is not any more the same that we have paid for. I think that this is a lack of balance at the contractual side. And I understand that this part is not with you. Probably we can see congresses, but at this moment, and see congresses in front of us is representing the IFCC conference, right?
I think, Jordi, the corporate has been signing these contracts for more than 2 decades. And so because there was no pandemic, there was no concern, and I think every conference became more and more successful. Like our last conference had thousands of attendees and, huge number of exhibits and so on. And I'm happy to tell you that actually we'll continue to get interest from new exhibitors, even this month. So first of all, I wanted to correct something you said, that you had paid for a live, but it's going to be virtual. That's not the case. It's going to be a live exhibit. There are going to be exhibits in Munich, and so all the corporate members are likely who are exhibiting will be there, and there will be a significant number of scientists who will be there. Now we don't know how many though at this time. So the truth is that there will be a significant in-presence or in-person attendance, but by both corporate and by members. Now, scientists and IFCC committees are actually going to be meeting. IFCC, some task forces are going to be meeting. So therefore, there will be a lot of people there. The question that we're asking right now, how else can we help corporate if the number is not that high? Perhaps we could help by offering virtual workshops, helping you to schedule some workshops in the conference. And so that's really what we're talking about. We're not saying that the exhibit will be turned into virtual. No.
I think the one thing that would be fair is that the industry-sponsored workshops are also streamlined in the same way that the program. And I tell you why. My rationale is, if this was full live Congress, we would have access to all the live attendees in the Congress to the virtual workshop, to the industry workshops, right? So the universe of the audience that we would target would be all the attendees live to the conference, right? Now, if it's hybrid, now the total universe of attendees is 2 groups, the ones that are going to be live and the ones that are going to be remote. If you don't streamline the industry workshops, you are preventing us access to half of the audience. So if it was full live, we will have access to everybody. Everybody will have access to the industry workshops. But if it's hybrid, I think that it's not fair that the access to the industry workshops is limited only to the ones that are live. I think that it should be streamlined so that we get access to the full audience in the same way that it should have been if it was a full live event. That's my rationale.
Yeah, I should say though that did offer, actually, this is like months ago, when there was a discussion between COC, the Conference Organizing Committee, MZETA, which is the PCO, and major sponsors. And the major sponsors did not want to have any e-exhibits. They did not. They wanted to have only in-person exhibits, and they were not interested in anything virtual. That's the truth. And so therefore, this is something that I think it's not anyone's fault. It's just that the corporate and the IFCC organization have been waiting and waiting for this pandemic to go away and hoping that it will go away by the next conference, but that's not happening. It's not happening. So we're all sort of in this uncertain situation, not to anyone's fault, but we need to work together to come up with the best format for any of these conferences. Alex, please.
And I will say the same about the e-exhibits. It's the same thing as the part of the virtual part of industry sportsman's workshop. If you want to organize them, we will try our best to find a way to accommodate them. But as you are providing and you are organizing your booths, for us will be a pleasure to have you are already organized e-exhibit in order to be hosted on the platform, because this, I think, it's much easier than to try to broadcast another 5 rooms on the same time. Although I don't could say that will be impossible, and we will see also with the involvement of the pandemic when we can accommodate. But also there is always the possibility of force majeure and touching wood that don't happen. But if that happens, we will do our best, because also IFCC that organize and MSZ haven't unlimited resources, and most of the expenses that we have to do for the organization of Europe has been already done. So.
Maybe I can jump in here a little bit. First of all, thanks to all the comments and really being direct. I just have a few maybe summarized comments that I want the IFCC EB to take forward. And it also involves Emizeta Congressi. And Jordi, I think you said this. To summarize where the corporate members feel is we feel we take all the risk when things change. There are no concessions to anything that happens moving forward. We paid it and we take the risk. And if we want to do something additionally, it would be at our cost. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, and Khosrow, you mentioned this, I think we all hope that someday, we thought it was EuroMedLab, we think it's Seoul, we think it's somewhere else, maybe AACC next year. We all hope that it's going to return to normal someday. But I can already tell you, and I'm only speaking in my company, we have just had quite significant conversation that we are asked at every possibility, not for only costs, but for other things like the environment and other things, to limit travel. So in my opinion, the IFCC could really take the lead here, because I think 5 years from now, we will not see 20,000 people at the AACC meeting. We will see less. And those organizations and those Congress, the PCOs and other groups that can figure out a way to really enhance the value it is to corporate members in this hybrid form, so people do not have to travel, so everything is available online, and we all share the cost and the risk, I think is the group that's going to get the greatest future moving forward. So I really would encourage, and Khosrow, I'm not going to share the details, but I would like to be transparent, and this is to Khosrow's credit and the IFCC. He has been aggressively negotiating with Emizeta Congressi to the terms of what each one of the stakeholders gets from a meeting. And so this is all have to be finalized and approved, and I can't share this, but I think those are the activities where we have to understand that if we have less attendance at a meeting, we meaning corporate members, we are getting less value, and something has to change. And that means that maybe the percentage going to Emizeta Congressi to the IFCC is less moving forward. Maybe there are many options that don't exist today to have, I mean, for example, we mentioned the COVID meeting in February, and there were exhibits, but we could not we cannot get the names of these people, so that we had no contact of these individuals. This is not helpful to us. It's simply not helpful to us. So I would really encourage all of us to think about ways now to the task force and to other corporate members to propose options of value for moving forward, to believe that the way your MedLab is going to happen in a few months is going to be the way all meetings will happen in the future. And we have to figure out a way to share the risk and to share the cost. And we don't have all the answers yet, but I think we have a good sense that after Seoul, we have a break now. We have Rome in 2023. Let's make that something that is valuable to everyone. I do want to stay on the budget because this also has come up in a couple other questions.
Joseph, could I address
Sure.
that?
Yeah, please.
I wanted to say that I fully agree with you. We have to look at it, the future of these conferences with a new vision based on what we're learning through the pandemic. And actually, I have proposed, and we are going to work on this, that there will be an IFCC virtual platform developed, an IFCC virtual platform that will be able to also provide access to corporate members for so they could have physical exhibits and they could have e-exhibits. They could have physical workshops if they're interested, as well as virtual workshops with the support of IFCC. So we are working on a very extensive platform that would actually be customized for IFCC. So I agree, I fully agree that whether it's AACC, IFCC, any conference, you're not going to see the same number of people traveling to these conferences. So therefore, we need to think differently. We got to look at the future, and we need to adapt. Basically, both the corporate need to adapt, IFCC, and all of these other organizations need to adapt. Sorry, there was a question. Was it Alex? Oh, no. So go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, no. I think we all recognize that we would want these options as you described, and the improvements for your MedLab in a few months. Maybe that's not realistic, but I think moving forward, we really have to go into this direction. And I want to go back to something Tricia said, but it really ties into what I wanted to bring up about the budgeting process. Tricia had mentioned that mid-October is too late for us. Absolutely the case. And I've shared this with the IFCC Executive Board for so many years to try to explain the budget process and the logistics around companies, small and large. Actually, this question comes from a small company, but for a large company, you can just expand this out. I think the IFCC doesn't recognize just how many months and months this takes to plan. And so it's not just the planning of speakers and workshops, it's also the planning of budgets. So if we're asked to sponsor something, we have to know way up in advance. And this is now to the hybrids or for companies to decide, well, they would provide the hybrid option. This has to be budgeted way in advance. I think sometimes the request for changes in the budget come way too late. And certainly the communications of changes to contracts and what this will look like for our key opinion leaders and also our workshops and exhibits come too late. I know it's difficult, but you have no idea what it will take to get this through. And as Tricia said, I wouldn't say the often, because a lot of companies, we jump through hoops. We actually jumped through hoops for the COVID conference in February. But some companies will simply walk away and say, you know what, it can't be done. It's not worth it. So please, I really want to highlight the importance of over-communicating very, very upfront by not only the IFCC office, but by Emiseta Congressi. And sometimes there's a disconnect on the IFC, on the corporate member side, because the people sitting on this call are not sitting with Emiseta Congressi. So this is a disconnect. But somehow we have to do a better job in proactively looking at these various things.
Yeah. But Joseph, to clarify, IFCC plans these meetings 4 to 6 years ahead of time. So the corporate usually have years to plan their event. Again, just want to remind everyone we're in a pandemic, so therefore changes had to be made, and almost several times this year, nobody had an idea whether it's going to be a fully in-person meeting, is it going to be a hybrid. There were actually a lot of controversy in this between various groups within IFCC and with the conference organizing committee. We had dialogue with our corporate sponsors. So there've been a lot of sort of last minute decisions being made, but this is a unique situation. This is not typically how IFCC has done its business. IFCC organizes conferences years ahead of time, announces dates, announces options for corporate sponsorship years ahead of time. We're actually
but sorry, Khosrow, but what I was saying earlier, this may seem right now as an exception. I fear that this will become the rule in 3 years, because and I'm not talking about the pandemic, I'm talking about the value associated with, and this value is in big quotes, the value associated with not physically going to every meeting, but yet still participating in a full way. And I think organizations have to come to the reality of this, and we all have to share the logistics, cost, and risk.
Of course, yeah. No, we're about to announce, for example, the conference in 2024, and select a venue, a city. And so the corporate would be informed 3 years ahead of time to plan, And my feeling is, Joe, it's the corporate's also responsibility to start looking at the reality and start becoming more flexible and not just focus on traditional approaches to conferences. I think we need to adapt, and I think the corporate need to adapt.
Okay, I think we maybe should leave this topic and go to something else. Just a question to the people that are still on the call. Does anyone have a question right now? Because I will sort through some of the other questions right now. Okay, the next question is about the federations. And maybe Khosrow, in a brief way, you can describe perhaps one of the key leading activities of each one of the federations that you're aware of. We have also Stephen from North America. And the other question is, will they be providing updates during the town hall meetings? The answer I can address is yes. And if I'm incorrect, the office should tell me by chat. I believe actually the recording of the first workshop is already on the IFCC website. So you can see all of their initiatives for Asia, for Arab, Africa, and the European Federation. But maybe you can give just a snapshot of what's going on with some of the federations.
So all federations, going to be involved in the town hall, as you mentioned, at different times. And all the recordings will be available for if you're interested in viewing what it's fully open. So you could view any of these once they are available. But in relation to federations, well, each federation actually has a number of regional activities, and IFCC supports them. I don't know if you know, we provide funding to not all the federations. Those that are well off are not funded by IFCC, but the others are funded. We provide a budget for them, and they use that budget, but also some of their own local funding to try to do all sorts of activities. They have regional conferences. Like, for example, next year, there will be a regional conference in Latin America, in Mexico. So there are a number of activities. They have visiting exchange among labs, like fellows rotating. They have scholarships with, and IFCC, by the way, provides a lot of support, funds many of these scholarships for young scientists from, let's say, Latin America or Africa to go to conferences. There are a number of activities within each federation. they don't have the same type of activity, except EFLM, I have to say. They don't have the same type of activity as IFCC, where we have committees looking at the specific analytes, standardization, harmonization. IFCC does that. EFLM does that as well. They have certain committees that are looking at some of these scientific questions. But other federations are mostly focused on activities around, communication, conferences, congresses, exchange, educational programs. Like there is a radio program, for example, in Latin America, you may not be aware, that's been quite popular with even high school students and so on. It tries to reach young people in Latin America. It's mostly in Spanish, although it's also in English, mostly in Spanish, to try to reach young people in Latin America. And Anna can comment on that. Anna represents the Kolabiokli. Anna, do you have any comments?
Yes, now it has been created a task force of young scientists here, and the idea is to work in a similar way of the task force we have at IFCC. We are working very much for the Congress in Mexico, and apart from the academic activity, there are also going to be awards for people, and there was a call for presenting with investigation projects to win these awards. So we are working a lot on these topics, and we are working on Joe Passarelli has already received the news about the projects we have, about the topics to be dealt on this Congress. We also have courses, pre-Congress courses, that are going to deal a lot of interesting topics about biochemistry, bioethics, molecular diagnostics, post analysis, pre-analytical phase, a lot of topics to be dealt, and the idea is to be all presentially, not virtually by the moment. As you know, as we all know, perhaps this can change if the situation changes also.
Thank you, Anna. Stephen, do you have any comments about the North American Federation on this? Stephen, yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so the North American Federation is quite a bit different from the other federations in that it was created 3 years ago when the executive board reorganized so that each federation had a seat on the executive board, and it was discovered at that point that since there was no federation in North America, the North American societies then did not have a seat. So the North American Federation of Clinical Chemistry was created, and its number one job then is to provide a liaison between the North American societies, the American Association for Clinical Chemistry and the Canadian Society of Clinical Chemists, to have a voice in the executive board, and for the executive board have a tunnel to communicate with AACC and CSCC as well. So that's really the major job. AACC is a very large and well-structured with many activities, and so they are easily represented on their own in some ways, but we now have a way for them to speak directly to the executive board with concerns or plans or ideas or things like that. So that's what the NFCCC does.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, Sunil, I think, left because it's a late hour for him. He's in Singapore, so it's right now 11:30 p.m. over there. So he's not with us, but Anna Maria apologizes, as I mentioned, and I don't see our African Federation or Arab Federation here, but we do have representation, as I showed in our presentations, that we from all 6 regions on the board, And all of them have specific activities. For example, the African Federation recently organized a nice virtual point of care conference, which I actually attended, so virtually. There are many activities around the world by these federations, and IFCC tries to fund these federations as much as possible. We have actually recently doubled their funding. We have the African Federation is funded, the Arab Federation is funded, as well as the Kolabiyokli is funded.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the presentations are all online, so you can see the various initiatives from the 3 federations so far, and North America and South America will come later, and Asia Pacific. I want to go to another question. It was actually a very interesting question that came in. I never considered this, and maybe the IFCC Executive Board, I'd be curious to hear what Khosrow and Alexander feel about this. The question was, is the IFCC, what's the point of view in the IFCC engaging in product evaluations and assessments for new products, new diagnostic products? Almost like, I would say maybe a clinical trial or some official IFCC assessment of a new product. So maybe Khosrow, you can comment on that?
Yeah, I saw that question in the list of questions that you had sent, and I was thinking about that. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but how can we actually do that without having, how can we independently evaluate diagnostic sort of reagents or instruments? It's something that's sort of currently out of the scope of IFCC's mandate and current plans, but we could bring it up, if you like, Joseph, at our next board meeting and see if it's feasible for IFCC to get involved in such activities to support our corporate members, like have some sort of a evaluation team or whatever. But I'm not sure. There are a number of questions that can then be brought up. I mean, currently, as you know, FDA and in different countries, certain bodies are involved in evaluating diagnostic sort of assays and so on. And they have a whole bunch of experts doing that. The question is, do we have the appropriate resources to do something like that? It sounds interesting to me, but we got to perhaps have some discussion to see how feasible this is.
And always there existed IFCC approved methods, etc., but they're arriving on this after examination of various techniques during long times, and scientific division mostly they're producing opinion papers that they give the status of IFCC approved assay to many assays, or even to calibration, as happened lately with creatinine, this exotic analyte that I don't think that has passed everywhere, the new calibration curve of creatinine, because there is the problem of FDA, of EMA, and other regulating bodies.
I was actually going to say something a little bit related. So within the scientific division, there is a lot of product assessments. So I mentioned the standardization of procalcitonin and others. But I think this question comes in not for existing products and standardization. It comes more from new products evaluation and assessment. And that's a different story, because typically the scientific division does not engage in that activity, although it's not something that has to be forever. So I would encourage us to talk about it on the executive board, and maybe we have some ideas. And if anyone's on the call that has ideas how this could be structured. I mean, when I first saw this question, the first thing that came to mind was a conflict of interest, because you're highlighting maybe one company that perhaps is innovative, that's developed a new product that no one else has, and you want to do this assessment. But maybe there's a structure we can work on. I want to actually come back to the budget issue and this question, Alexander, is for you. And a number of questions came in this area. And I think it highlights something that we talked about, is the value of what our sponsorship and support is to the organizations that we serve. And it really goes to maybe having more detail. The very simple question to you, Alexander, is it possible that we could receive, either through the task force or some other mechanism, a much more detailed breakdown of where our money goes? So each company is responsible for yearly fees, but we also put in other supports for travel sponsorships and educational sponsorships. I think there is an interest to have a little bit more granularity of where our dollars are being spent. And the reason why, and this also came in as a comment and a question, is that more and more we are being faced to justify, when we submit a request for funding, what does this mean and what will it provide? So I've seen the budgets of the IFCC. They're much more bigger buckets, but is there any granularity behind that? Maybe you can comment to this, Alexander.
I think that budgets of IFCC were always transparent, but if you want higher granularity, we have discussed in the EB how we can present this. That means you have the breakout of divisions and of committees and of working groups. And I think that you understand the worth of each functional unit of IFCC and what it offers back to the industry. And from there, you can justify your resources that has been given to invested to the FCC. But really, we have nothing to hide, and we can have much more detailed budget if you want them. But we will have an enormous paper with the breakout of the budgets of the various functional units.
Maybe a general question then. I'm just thinking about this. So I know the percentage of the budget that comes just from the yearly fees of corporate members. What is that budget used for mostly? I mean, what are the big ticket items that goes to? Just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. So we, between the national societies provide the membership fee, and it's sort of, it depends on the GDP of that country, and so we charge much less the countries developing or developing nations, and higher for the more affluent nations. So we use a special sort of formula. Anyways, so those fees plus the corporate membership, which is also based on the annual income of that company, they altogether, I think it's around 500,000-600,000 a year, and that's actually not enough to run the organization. Between the four divisions, funding the four divisions, so that's why we always depend on some other income like conference income. So when we had all these committees meet regularly, the task forces and so on, we always almost had a deficit unless we had a conference where the conference provided additional funding so that we could. But thanks to our treasurers, Alex, and before that, Tomris and others, over the years, we have been able to build a nest egg, and this nest egg is going to help cushion some of the more challenging years where our income would be lower. But I want to assure you that IFCC spends every one of these dollars on programs and some travel for committee members. But as I said, our current focus is try to reduce travel costs as much as possible. And actually, in the last 2 years, the travel cost has been almost minimal, very small. So that has allowed us to save some funds again. And these funds are going into these programs that we just discussed, new programs. So the idea is to spend any funding provided by corporate or by national societies on programs and mostly focus programs, of course, scientific programs that are helpful to everyone around the world, as well as corporate members. A lot of the standardization efforts, harmonization efforts, educational programs, and so on. But in addition to that, these new programs are trying to make a difference on the ground, as we discussed, like quality assurance, newborn screening, the new databases. If once we have a global reference interval database, I think every one of you could potentially use it on a regular basis. So, the funds are going to go into programs more and more, and less on travel. And I think, and as I said, almost all of the funds currently are going into program, minimal to travel. One last point is that every one of the IFCC budgets is published every year on the website. So you all have access. Actually, you can go and look at the budget from 2020, 2019, 2018. It's all transparent. It's all there. But if you have specific questions about any budgetary item, if you want to have more granularity and more details, we can provide.
Yeah, maybe a related question now off the money part and more of the outcome. What was the value achieved? A question came in is, how can corporate members get a better sense of what the outcome was? What was the, so for example, one way that I do it is I often go on the IFCC website, and at least through the divisions, you can get an executive summary of the minutes, and I read through these minutes to see. But for many of the task forces and committees and working groups, which are highly funded by corporate members, we do not see any sort of communication outwardly unless you serve as a corresponding member or a member. So once again, to create better value for us, but also for rationale for future funding, I would like the executive board to take the action maybe to ask the chairs for every group to somehow come up with some communication mechanism, whether it's minutes or something, that we really can understand in a very easy way what is going on, once again, with the funding that we're providing. What was the outcome? What was the result?
Very good point. I think it's important for corporate to be aware of the progress each of these groups are making. I should say the minutes are available. For example, the task force minutes are usually uploaded on the website. So again, it is a lot of good information. And so let's say if you want to know what's happening on task force on ethics or task force on newborn screening, you can actually go on the website and see their latest minutes. So that's there. Also, my suggestion is that because we have corporate members on each of these task forces and committees, they should also be reporting back to their company and to the task force, perhaps, so that you as corporate members supporting the IFCC have a better feel for what's happening. I agree, we need better, communication. If you have ideas of how better to communicate some of this work or activity, we'd be happy to. By the way, one way to understand what's happening with IFCC is to read the newsletter. We have probably one of the best newsletters out there for any organization. We have this month, we just published earlier this week, a 57-page newsletter. And there was a lot of good information there on a lot of activities around the IFCC. So there are ways currently. The newsletter, which is monthly, except for August and December, we publish monthly newsletters, and they're very, very detailed. There's a lot of good articles from different groups, and then in different parts of the world. Also, the minutes, the IFCC website is almost updated on a daily basis. by our office. So there is, but if you have ideas about how best to improve that communication, we're definitely open to that.
We have about 20 minutes. We need a few minutes to close. I want to change subjects completely because Khosrow, you actually went through this topic in some detail at the last week's Federation Town Hall, and there was a lot of discussion at the task force about this. Can you, and you had actually a slide, I think, or maybe 2 slides. Could you describe some of the activities that the IFCC board is initiating with respect to Lab Week for next year and moving forward? And we had some discussion about this at the task force.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me of this. This is actually should be something that corporate members should be aware of. We have begun a discussion to develop a new program called the Global Lab Medicine. We have just changed the name to Global Lab Medicine Week. And this is to promote both labs, the profession of lab medicine, but also the lab professionals working in the field. And I strongly feel that this is a sort of, should also include corporate colleagues and corporate members, because IVD industry plays a critical role in the field, and not just the scientists or the lab professionals. So this should be a teamwork to celebrate. The idea is to annually, but also throughout the year, not just once a year, but we will have 1 week in April called the Global Lab Medicine Week that we will be inviting you soon to start getting involved. But for now, we're just in the planning stage. I can show you perhaps the document we have put together, but we basically now have a vision, sort of a vision statement. We also have, we're going to focus on basically letting people know the target audience are the public at large, hospital administrators, governmental agencies, other healthcare professionals. Many doctors and nurses do not know what goes on in labs. They see it as a black box. They order a test, they get a number back, but they don't really know what goes on. So the idea is to promote the field through this Global Lab Medicine Week, and to do it throughout the year, not just at this 1 week a year. Now, as you know, the groups in the US have been very active in this area, and we're trying to learn from them. They have 17 societies in the US organize the current Lab Week that US, you probably, I'm sure, have heard of. There is also a pathology lab day and lab week out of the UK. And there are a few other programs around the world. I've actually learned that several societies already have their own programs. So therefore, there are these programs around the world. The idea of this Global Lab Medicine Week to bring efforts together, particularly outside the US, because the US is already well covered on this issue, but we like to collaborate with them. But for now, we're focusing on a program that will have an international sort of campaign around the Lab Week. This will include, there is a current working group that's trying to come up with a plan. We're actually going to call for proposals from media companies. We're going to hire a media company to help us develop the tools, professional videos, professional pamphlets, so on and so on, and a major social media campaign. So this is work in progress. It just started, and there's going to be a formal announcement in Munich. There will be a formal announcement of this program at the EuroMedLab conference, but it will actually begin next year. So that's a quick review, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have questions about this topic before I move on? I don't see any in the chat or so. Okay. another question that now does not go to the EB, but I have to say, and I don't mean to put any more on the IFCC staff, but I'm going to, and please, you can respond, Sylvia or Paolo or anyone, that this is okay. It was more of a comment, and I think it's a great idea and something that we need to take up. It says, is there a plan for the IFCC to provide a complete list of action items collected from all of the inputs from the 4 town hall meetings? And I think this is an excellent suggestion. For example, I can recall a few that I said, oh, we should take this up at the EB or somewhere else. So this is seen as very, very, very helpful to the corporate members. And I see Paula has joined, or Sylvia. Can you comment whether how is this going to happen in how we have access to the information from all of these town halls?
We can liaise with Professor Adeli and Dr. Kinnenberger and see how to handle the actions items, if you agree, okay?
Yes.
So we can deal
I think
with
it's
the
a
various
great
questions.
idea. It's a great idea. We'll discuss it with you, Joseph, and with the office, and we'll make that happen. I agree. It's a good idea to sort of come up with some sort of what are the feedback that we received. I think we need to do that for every town hall.
And I'm fully confident that in spite of everything else, you will figure out a way and some resources to do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
An interesting question came in, Khosrow, and this, I sent you all the questions. I think this was one of the questions because this requires a little bit of, I think, thinking or reflection. But here's the question. What does the IFCC consider to be the best achievement this year in terms of partnership between its corporate members and the IFCC?
Well, I would say it was our virtual conference back in February. In very short time, we were able to work together with multiple industry colleagues to put together a very successful virtual conference on COVID-19. Actually, we had many, I think 18 different sponsors within a couple of months of announcing the virtual conference, which was new to everybody, including to IFCC. About 3,000 people attended. We had many industry workshops. We had e-exhibits. I realized the e-exhibits were new and not that useful, but the industry workshops went very well, and they were very well received by people, and many of them were well attended. We also had like 60 different speakers. By the way, we had the speakers from around the world, and the audience was from around the world. Again, more than 100 countries attending, people from different countries, and the speakers were also from all over different regions. So I see that as a successful, especially with strong corporate sponsorship. At no time, it was announced, just a few months before the event. Because of the urgency of the pandemic, we had to organize it quickly. But because we wanted, at that time, people were very interested to hear about COVID-19 diagnostics. And I know many corporate members were quite happy with that event. Anyways, I hope that IFCC saw that as a success. I hope the corporate saw it as a success as well.
Yeah, I think for full transparency, it was a successful meeting, but there were some issues in the logistics and organization, partly because of the short timing to organize it, but there could have been improvements made, and there were certainly issues to improve. So for full transparency to anyone on the call, Tricia and I, through the task force, we put a list of issues to discuss, and we sat down with Khosrow, David, and Embassador Congressi, Stefano, and we did kind of like a post-mortem, only focused on the COVID-19 conference. But I think it ties back to some of the discussion that we had earlier. And that is, look, this is the new reality of the situation, and we should proactively put in place certain things that can adjust and very quickly share the risk and the cost. But I just wanted to inform all of the people on the call, yes, it was successful, but issues were communicated back to the key stakeholders. Just a question that came in, and maybe this might be the last question, and it goes to Khosrow, Alexander, Stephen, Anna Maria, whoever from the EB. It's kind of like an open question, but it gets to, I think, the concept. How can corporate members become more of an equal partner to the IFCC Executive Board? And let me explain what that, a little bit behind that, just in one sentence. I'm the only person representing the corporate members. So I have one vote, one voice. And we have an EB that's 9 people, I think. So what are the things that you can suggest back to corporate members that could help us and to the task force so that we feel as equal partners? Because in the end, we provide a great deal of the funding. So maybe I'll first give it to Khosrow, Alexander, Steve, whoever wants to join in here.
Perhaps, yeah, we have a comment, but Stephen, Alex, Anna, do you have any comment?
I mean, let me just say one other thing. I think the feeling behind this question is we don't feel as equal partners. I mean, to be really transparent and open. So that's the feeling that this, I think, person gave to the question.
Maybe we can say the same from some regions or some societies, but I think that IFCC is the cooperation of all the societies, all the federation and all their corporate members, that we have to work together and respecting one another, because anyway, without the IVDs, I don't think that the IFCC could make many things, not as IFCC, as our science, our profession and everything.
And Joseph, I don't see it necessarily. I don't think it's like 2 different groups partnering. This is a family that includes, 95 countries, tens of thousands of scientists, and 49 corporate members working together. That's how we see it. We see it as a family. We see it, and we got to work together. There are always going to be concerns, issues, but we need to, and that's why the idea of this town hall. And we could have more of these. Doesn't have to be once a year. If the corporate wants more regular dialogue, we could find other ways. But anyways, the idea is to have the dialogue to address them. But we don't see that concern because we feel that the corporate, we have a vested interest to work with corporate. Corporate has vested interest to work with IFCC. And at the end of the day, we're sort of focused on the same goal, which is to promote the field, support labs around the world, we scientifically supporting, and the corporate supporting commercially by providing products and innovations and so on. So I see it as a family working together. But if there are ways to improve that and address concerns, but I didn't quite understand the question that, we don't feel as a true partner. I didn't know exactly what that means because it's
not my question, but maybe reading into the question, I think, for example, let's just take a look at all these task forces that have been established. Okay, the decision is made by the executive board, and I haven't been part of the task forces because these came before me. But they're decided, they're going to be funded in some cases quite a bit by the IFCC, and yet the only involvement of corporate members is at the end where we're asked to nominate people and get the announcement. I think the feeling is more proactively, we should input into, and I'm just using that as an example and just reading into the question, we should input into, okay, if $100,000 is going to go to this task force, what are the goals of this task force? And okay, you would say, or the EB would say, well, yeah, then just participate on the task force. But it's a little too late. I think we should be more involved. But unfortunately, we have to stop it here because we have 5 minutes, and I want to give.
Well, I want to respond to that, Joseph.
Yeah.
The fact that these new task forces, these new programs were approved last year, actually in 2020, during the EB discussions. and Rolf was there as a representative of the corporate members. And he actually, and I know you recently have been supporting these new programs. So corporate has been aware of these programs and have actually seen, we have actually, every one of these programs, there was a proposal submitted to the EB. And I mean, we cannot have multiple representatives on the EB because we have one per region, and therefore we have also one from corporate. So the truth is, the corporate have been aware of these programs. They were reviewed last year. There were multiple. There were monthly meetings, and there were multiple EB meetings that discussed the newborn screening program, the global quality assurance program, and so on and so on. Even the live webinar series, all of these were discussed at length, and Rolf actually almost in all cases was very supportive, and you can talk to him. But anyways, I just see, I don't see that as an issue because there was corporate. I cannot see how else we could sort of inform the corporate. It's usually through the representative. But if there are ways we could improve that dialogue, we'd be happy to.
Well, maybe we'll make this a topic for your med lab. We'll start with this perhaps and get more clarity around this. We only have 3 minutes. I wanted to give Cosmo a minute or two to close, but I also want to close first. And to say the following is, first of all, thanks very much for everyone's participation. It's very late in somewhere and it's very early still in somewhere else. I also want to thank all of the people that submitted the questions. Thank you very much. And an ask from me, a couple asks. If you're interested to participate even further, please consider, like Anne, to join the task force as a corresponding member, because this is really an excellent way to get more information about the IFCC back and forth. I also, you mentioned Ralph Hintzman, he told me this, and I have the same experience from the scientific division. You have my email address. Please use it. Send me at any time. I represent you. This is my job. So please, if there's any support that you need, any concerns, anything that you need me to do, please email me and I will comment immediately and pursue it, either through me or the task force. So that's really what I wanted to say. And I have to say one more thing for full transparency. I was unsure of how valuable the town hall was. And the task force members know my communications to this. I think over the last 3 or 4 weeks, Khosrow, Alexander, David, and the other EB members, we put together a program that had much more content and I think value and information. So I want to thank the EB. I also want to thank all of the members that participated in this. And from my perspective, we should do this again, and maybe not every year, maybe every 6 months. So Khosrow, I give it up to you now.
Thank you all. Just to spend 1 minute or two, thanking everyone for participating. It is really important to have our corporate members visible, dialoguing with us, talking to us, and if there are concerns, expressing them, and so that we can address them. I want to thank the EB members who were able to join us, as well as our office, who has worked hard to organize these, particularly Sylvia Colilanzi, who has been organizing the platform for this virtual town hall. So thanks everybody. And MSZ actually has been helping to develop the platform. So thank you all. We appreciate your attendance. As Joe mentioned, we're going to review the feedback. We're going to really look at how we can respond to the feedback as constructively as possible. And we will address concerns that have been expressed. And we're going to look forward to, perhaps if there is an opportunity in Munich to have another dialogue and another town hall soon. That's all from me. Anyone else who would like to make any last-minute comment?
Thank you all for your participation and for your feedback. And really you gave us many issues to think about and many things to ameliorate in the future. Because we need always the direct correspondence and interaction with all members of the family of IFCC, either societies, federation, corporate members.
Exactly. As I mentioned, we all should be sort of working together towards this sort of a central goal. Anna, you want to say something, please?
Yes, as I put in the chat, it was an excellent opportunity to discuss very important topics. And I think that we can continue discussing all what discussed today. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It was a long 3 hours, but hopefully it was productive. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.